It was one of the largest predators that the world had ever seen, known as the king of the dinosaurs, the prize fighter of antiquity, the tyrant lizard king. But you and I and everyone else know it by the name Tyrannosaurus rex, or simply the T-Rex. Since its discovery, it has become an icon of pop culture, a mainstay of movies, books, and video games. If you want to make anything that is dinosaur related, you better put a T-Rex in it. It's the law. And today we are taking a close look at how this came to be, from the first bones dug out of the sandstone to the media darling it turned into. This is the story of the Tyrannosaurus rex. Welcome to Zoographics, the channel where we talk about the history and science of animals. I'm your host for this episode, cosmic horror author Eric Malachite. Today's script was provided by Radu Alexander, so be sure to show him some love in the comments as you deploy your likes, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell if you haven't, and share this video with someone who loves animals and dinosaurs. Let's get to it. The story of how the mighty T-Rex was discovered is a rather long and complicated one, but it took over 30 years from the time when paleontologists unearthed the first T-Rex fossil to when the first specimen was mounted on display so the general public could come gawk at it in awe. We travel back to the late 19th century in the mountain states of America, an absolute hotbed for paleontology. At the time, the field was dominated by two men you'll be familiar with if you watched our biographics video on the Bone Wars. They were Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh, two American paleontologists who hated each other with a passion that would make the Hatfields and McCoys look on with envy. Those two were locked in a perpetual competition to see who could find and describe the most dinosaurs. To that end, they employed agents to secure fossils for them, and one of them was geologist Arthur Lakes. One day in 1874, Lakes and a student named P.T. Dobson were hiking on South Table Mountain near Golden, Colorado, when they uncovered the fossil of a giant tooth. Lake could tell it belonged to a large meat-eating dinosaur, but that's about it. So he sent it to Marsh to see if he could do any better. He couldn't. Turns out there's not much you can tell from a single tooth. So into a dusty drawer it went, and it wasn't until the year 2000 that it was identified as belonging to the Tyrannosaurus rex, thus retroactively making it the first T-Rex fossil ever discovered. In 1891, paleontologist John Bell Hatcher made a similar find, this time of a few hip bones that he also sent to Marsh. Unlike the tooth from Lakes, Marsh did assign these fossils to a dinosaur in 1896, except that he believed they belonged to a species of Ornithomimus, which he named Ornithomimus grandis. Again, it wasn't until much later that other paleontologists worked out that Ornithomimus grandis didn't exist, and that the bones belonged in fact to the T-Rex. Edward Drinker Cope got in on the action as well. In 1892, his collectors sent him some vertebrae which he believed came from a new horned dinosaur that he named Monospondylus gigas. Again, not a real dinosaur. Those were T-Rex bones. Some misidentifications were common in paleontology at the time, especially in the case of Marsh and Cope, who were always in a rush to publish a new description like they were being paid by the species. It wasn't until the start of the 20th century that the first documented remains of the Tyrannosaurus rex were discovered. That honor belonged to Barnum Brown, a paleontologist employed by the American Museum of Natural History to travel the country looking for fossils. One peculiar thing we can tell you about him is that Brown loved wearing fur coats, even on dig sites. After all, what's the point of hunting for fossils if you can't look fabulous doing it? Then, in 1902, Brown made an even more significant discovery near Jordan, Montana, in an area known as the Hell Creek Formation that stretches over portions of Montana, Wyoming, and North and South Dakota. It was something massive, unlike anything he had ever seen before, unlike anything thought possible to find in America. He wrote back to the museum, telling them that he had no doubt this would be the find of the season, and to ask for more money because getting it out of the ground would not be an easy task. In fact, it took Brown several years to excavate the fossil. All the bones were encased in sandstone and separated by 2 or 3 feet of sand. Part of the delay was also because Brown tried to be as secretive as possible in his work. He knew that other paleontologists were not above spying, bribing, and even stealing if the prize was just too good to pass up. Eventually, by 1905, the fossil was in the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Brown's job was done. He was strictly the fossil hunter, so it was on to the next dig site. Now came the turn of his boss, museum president and renowned paleontologist Henry Fairfield Osborn, and to be honest, Osborn kind of rushed his work. He was getting ready to publish a paper on carnivorous dinosaurs and wanted to include both specimens found by Brown since he knew that they undoubtedly would be the highlight. As a result, Osborn made a mistake. He identified the two fossils as being distinct species, and it wasn't until the following year that he realized and corrected his slip-up. The one in Wyoming, discovered in 1900, was named Dinosaurus imperiosus. Because Osborn thought they were different dinosaurs, he designated the 1902 one as the holotype specimen, meaning the single specimen selected as the representative of a new species. All it needed was a name, and to his credit, Osborn came up with an absolute show-stealer. He called it the Tyrant Lizard King, or Tyrannosaurus rex. In December 1906, the first T-Rex was put on display at the American Museum of Natural History. The crowds lined up around the block, eager to witness the giant predator that once stalked North America. By that point, Osborn had realized his mistake in labeling the other specimen, the Dinosaurus imperiosus, as a separate species and amended his error. Although the Dinosaurus was discovered first, Osborn wisely opted to name them both Tyrannosaurus rex since that was the name of the holotype. Plus, let's be honest, it sounded way cooler. Otherwise, nowadays, we would be talking about the D-Imp instead of the T-Rex, and that's just not as cool. Either way, he soon lost interest in either one. In 1908, Brown had found another fossil, again in the same Hell Creek Formation. That is a name that's going to pop up a lot in dinosaur videos because it was an absolute treasure trove of fossils. It took some years before this specimen was dug out of the ground and put on display, but in 1915 it was finally ready. It was bigger and more complete than the previous ones, and although it doesn't have a name unlike other specimens that came after it, it's definitely the most famous T-Rex in the world. We could argue it is the most famous dinosaur, period. Why? Because most of you have already seen it multiple times without even realizing it, and would recognize it now if you saw it again. Yes, it was used for the logo for Jurassic Park. With this new dino taking center stage, it appears that the American Museum of Natural History wasn't big enough for two T-Rexes. We mean literally. They put the original one in storage, which seems like a fate ill-befitting the holotype T-Rex, the supposed gold standard by which all other T-Rexes are measured. Even worse, it was kept in storage until 1941, when they finally sold it to the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, who were thrilled to get their hands on their very own T-Rex. And who wouldn't be? Maybe the American Museum of Natural History got rid of their first dino in the belief that they would soon find more specimens, bigger and more complete than the original. After all, Brown discovered the first three within a decade of each other, and now that they knew where to look, it was a fair assumption to make. But they were in for a big disappointment because the T-Rex well soon ran dry, and it would be a long time before a new one was unearthed. In total, paleontologists have recovered around 30 T-Rex skeletons, and most of them have been found during the last 4 decades or so. The majority of them were in the aforementioned Hell Creek Formation, but also a few in Canada, in Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Probably the most significant period for T-Rex enthusiasts was the late 80s, early 90s, because that's when 4 of the most complete specimens were found within a 5-year stretch. First, there was Stan, unearthed in 1987 and named after its discoverer, Stan Sacrison. Standing 4 meters tall and 12 meters long, Stan was a big old boy that weighed around 7 metric tons, and, according to a 2005 study, had a bite force that was strong enough to crush a car. Just to solidify that he was the mightiest of hunters, Stan was found alongside the fossilized and partially digested remains of an Edmontosaurus, which was by no means small prey, and a Triceratops, which was even bigger and deadlier. Both dinos had bite marks on their bones, which goes to show you that nobody was safe from the T-Rex, no matter how big they were. Since its discovery in 1987, Stan has become the most reproduced T-Rex in the world. So if you ever saw a cast of a Tyrannosaurus in a museum or an exhibition somewhere, chances are pretty good it was Stan. As for the genuine article, it was sold at auction in 2020 for a then record-breaking $31.8 million to the soon-to-open National History Museum in Abu Dhabi. And roughly two-thirds intact stand skeleton was by far the most complete T-Rex specimen that had ever been found up until 1987. But just a year later, a family out on a morning hike in Montana made an incredible discovery. Kathy Wankel was walking with her kids and husband when she saw something peculiar sticking out of the ground. As she would later discover, it was the shoulder blade of a Tyrannosaurus rex, which isn't exactly something you come across every day, and why have my wife and I not found a T-Rex yet? I'm offended. It took a couple of years to get it out, but it was worth it. The Wankel T-Rex was 80 to 85% complete. It wasn't quite as big as Stan, but it featured some parts that paleontologists had never even seen before, like the lower arm bones. Because the dino was found on federal land, it was technically owned by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, who loaned it to the Museum of the Rockies in Bozeman, Montana, to put it on display. It has affectionately been dubbed the nation's T-Rex, and in 2013, it took a new place of honor inside the Smithsonian. Just 2 years after the Wankel T-Rex was found, a fossil hunter from the Black Hills Institute named Sue Hendrickson stumbled upon an even more remarkable discovery. It was a Tyrannosaurus, of course, but this one was even bigger and more complete than anything that had ever been found before. I'm saying that a lot in this video, aren't I? Sue the dinosaur, named after her discoverer, has been described as the Rosetta Stone of the species, helping paleontologists understand this primordial predator better than any other specimen found before or since. To this day, Sue is still the most complete adult T-Rex ever found. We stress the word adult. A few more complete juveniles have been recovered. She still has 250 of her bones intact out of the approximately 380 that we believe T-Rexes possessed. It might sound like there were still a lot missing, but these were all the tiny bones. By volume, Sue was 90% complete and included some rare parts such as the wishbone, an ear bone, and a set of rib-like bones called the gastralia, which supposedly helped the T-Rex breathe by pushing air in and out of the lungs, similar to the human diaphragm. In terms of size, Sue was the biggest one yet. She was slightly longer than Stan at approximately 12.5 meters and weighed close to 8.5 metric tons. But just a year later, a new challenger emerged for the title when Scotty the T-Rex was uncovered in the Frenchman Formation of Saskatchewan. Well, in reality, Sue held onto the crown for decades because finding Scotty and actually getting him out were two entirely different things. Even though paleontologists found him in 1991, they only started digging him out in 1994, and it took them over 20 years to fully remove the bones from the dense iron-heavy sandstone they were encased in. But when they finally succeeded, they had quite a catch on their hands. What is probably the biggest T-Rex ever discovered? Man, I'm saying that a lot, aren't I? We have to say probably because the weight of these prehistoric predators has been a bone of contention with scientists ever since they unearthed the first T-Rex. It's not as easy as placing them on a scale and seeing what it reads. There are always going to be disagreements and margins of error, especially when a huge part of the dinosaur is missing, and in Scotty's case, he's only about 2/3 complete. But going by the currently accepted measurements, Scotty slightly edges Sue out in the size department, measuring up to 13 meters in length and weighing over 8.8 tons, which is about 400 kilograms more than Sue. However, it will not surprise you to discover that the Field Museum in Chicago, which is home to Sue the T-Rex, very much disputes these findings. And they may not be the only ones. Indeed, just earlier this year, a team of scientists unveiled a new computer modeling technique using factors such as lifespan, growth rate, population size, and body size variation to determine the true dimensions of dinosaurs. And if they are correct, then neither Sue nor Scotty was the prize pig at the fair, because the computer modeling for the T-Rex suggests that other specimens could have been up to 70% heavier and 25% longer than either of them. However, going by current information, the T-Rex weighs in at 9 tons and measures 13 meters from nose to tail. That still makes him a hefty boy. In fact, it's enough to place him among the largest land predators of all time, possibly outmatched only by two other dinosaurs, the Gigantosaurus and the Spinosaurus. And yes, we would love to cover them both in the future. As you can see, the study of the Tyrannosaurus Rex is very much an ongoing process, and we are nowhere near knowledgeable enough about them to make any assertions with absolute certainty. Mistakes were made from the very beginning. For example, the first T-Rex that was put on display by Osborn and many others that followed it were mounted in an upright posture, with the tail dragging along on the ground. It wasn't until the 1960s that paleontologists concluded that the body of the dinosaur was too back-heavy to stay balanced like that, and that the T-Rex likely walked with the body parallel to the ground, with its tail acting as a counterbalance to its massive head, unlike, Godzilla. The T-Rex could probably stand upright for short periods of time, or to reach something high, but it mostly adopted a stalking posture with the head and torso lowered forward and the tail raised in the air. The first T-Rex also had 3 claws, but this was more guesswork from Osborn. No forelimbs or feet had been recovered, so he took his inspiration from other theropods, which usually had 3 digits. And the T-Rex is indeed a theropod, referring to a group of bipedal dinosaurs with hollow, thin-walled bones, but as it happens, it only has 2 claws on each arm. The same biomechanics studies that changed T-Rex's posture also slowed him down considerably. At first, paleontologists thought that the T-Rex was quite a sprinter capable of clocking speeds of 48 kilometers an hour with a walking pace of 8 kilometers an hour. But that estimate kept going down as the research suggested more and more that the T-Rex wasn't built for speed. The latest estimates put the dino's walking speed at a leisurely 5 kilometers per hour, with top speeds no higher than 20 kilometers an hour. So that iconic chase scene in Jurassic Park is busted. While a T-Rex would probably still catch a human if it fancies a midnight snack, there's no way it's keeping up with a Jeep. Speaking of which, we should probably address the elephant in the room. The Tyrannosaurus rex did not live during the Jurassic period. The Mesozoic era, also known as the Age of the Dinosaurs, lasted from 252 to 66 million years ago and was divided into 3 periods: Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. The T-Rex was around at the very end of the late Cretaceous period, during the last 4 to 5 million years of the Mesozoic era, before it got wiped out during the massive Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction event alongside all of its non-avian cousins. The Jurassic period, on the other hand, ended 145 million years ago, and some quick math tells us that the T-Rex actually lived closer to you and me than it did to the dinosaurs of the Jurassic period. But this is one mistake we can forgive. Cretaceous Park just doesn't have the same ring to it. But what about individual T-Rexes? How long did they live? Well, fortunately, dinosaurs like the T-Rex had something called cortical growth marks. These marks appeared in the bones every year so they could be used to gauge their age the same way we use tree rings. Not only that, but the spacing between the marks showed the rate of growth. Widely spaced marks indicated a speedier growth rate, while narrower ones showed slower growth. And it seemed that the T-Rex could live for about 30 years. Several specimens have been recovered that were around that age when they died, including the aforementioned Scotty. Moving on, we would be remiss if we didn't mention one of the T-Rex's most peculiar physical characteristics: its tiny arms. Measuring only 1 meter long, they don't seem to go with the rest of the body. They couldn't reach the dinosaur's mouth and could barely touch each other, so it begs the question, what were they for? This question has been around for over a century, and it still does not have a definitive answer. Because they appear to be so useless, some paleontologists asserted that they may simply be vestigial and hold no purpose. Others have different ideas, however. Henry Fairfield Osborn, the man who named and described the T-Rex, speculated that they could be pectoral claspers used by the males to hold onto the females when they were getting their groove on. Other proposed uses include using the arms for social signaling between each other, or some kind of mating gestures employed by the males to attract partners. But some researchers think that the arms weren't quite as harmless as one would believe. In fact, they assert that the T-Rex could use them for close-quarters combat, slashing at its prey while holding it in place with its powerful bite. One idea suggests that the arms were small so other T-Rexes wouldn't eat them during pack feeding. It might sound a little unusual, but it's a phenomenon we see with crocodiles today. Even if they are eating with their best bros, they can easily lose a limb if they get too close to another croc's mouth during dinner time. Now, whether or not T-Rexes even fed in packs, we're not sure. but some believe that they hunted and ate together, so this could be a feasible scenario. Mind you, tiny arms would only prevent another T-Rex from eating them by accident. They were of no help if the other T-Rex actively wanted to eat them, which apparently is something that happened, because the T-Rex was a cannibal. Close examination of Tyrannosaurus's bones found marks that had been made by T-Rex teeth, which means that this dino was not above nibbling on his own kind. What we can't say for sure is if the unfortunate T-Rex was dead before or after it became a meal for its cousin. Despite the T-Rex's fearsome reputation as a mighty hunter, it was also a scavenger who didn't turn his nose up from some carrion. Remember that the T-Rex was a hyper-carnivore whose diet consisted mainly of meat, so it's not surprising that it was willing to eat any and every creature that came in its path. Our understanding of the T-Rex and dinosaurs in general is constantly evolving, and what was true yesterday might not be true tomorrow. New fossils will be discovered, better technology will be invented, and they will help us fill in more blanks about the life of this primal predator. Until then, we hope you enjoyed this look at the Tyrannosaurus Rex, the king of the dinosaurs. I hope you learned something today, and if you enjoyed this little video, be sure to deploy your likes, comment your favorite dinos, subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell if you haven't, and share this video with someone who loves learning about animals and dinosaurs. I'm Eric Malachite, and we'll see you next time.